Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Morgan, founder and CEO at Vudoo.
And I'm Paul Blackburn, Chief Growth Officer at Vudoo.
And today we're doing something a little different. Rather than a traditional guest interview, we thought we'd bring a few of the team in for more of an industry catch-up, a download on what's been happening across the event circuit today.
Yeah, because there's been a lot on between Cairns Crocodiles, Ascendant Network Council, and everything in between, and everything that's going on in the market, AI, etc. There's a lot of interesting conversations to be had, and the team have been out there on the ground doing it.
So, joining us today is Andrea Hill, Vudoo's Senior Vice President of Retail Practices.
Hello.
And Sarah Lawson Johnston, Managing Director, Global Revenue and Partnerships.
Hello.
Before we get into it, not all of us were at every event.
No, we weren't at Ascendant in the lovely Paris. The girls got to go to Paris. We didn't get to go to the amazing waterfront at Cairns for the Crocodiles.
Cairns.
But we were at Possible in Miami. And there's definitely been plenty of industry chatter that we've all been across and happening around the world.
Certainly has. So in this episode, it's a bit of a download on what we saw, what we heard, and some of the big takeaways, which I'm interested in coming out of all of it. So let's get into it. It feels like the industry has hit that part of the year where everybody is everywhere. Is that what you're feeling too?
Yes, it's definitely event season.
Gearing up, yeah. And I think, I mean, for us, it's been a big year, and I can imagine for some of the retailers, I know that there's Retail X, there's a few other conferences that we haven't attended, but it started with CES for us, APAC NRF coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and it all leads up to the big one for us, at least in Cannes and onwards. So yeah, events.
Lots of people going to events. I think, definitely in the room at Ascendant yesterday, people were saying, they were chatting about Retail X last week, and then they're going to see each other next week at something else, and then everyone's going to be in Cannes too. So, it definitely feels like everybody's on the circuit. One thing interesting, though, that came out of yesterday was that there was only one or two brands that were there. Yeah, so one of the themes that I think came out of yesterday, and Amy Owen mentioned it, was that brands aren't really traveling. They're not allowed to go to events. So there was quite literally only one or two brands in the room. And Amy actually mentioned that she has been asked many times to go and attend events on behalf of brands because they're just not traveling from a cost perspective, I think from a perception point of view. So I think that for us as adtech vendors and agencies becomes a little bit tricky because the brands just aren't traveling. I would say that's different to the retail media networks and the retailers. There was lots of retailers, obviously, they're out and about.
They're everywhere.
The retail media networks are everywhere because they are also now selling. They've got a product to sell. They've got inventory to sell, so they have to be.
You're a media company, a media network.
Yeah, they have to be on the circuit. So I think that will be tricky and interesting to hear your guys' take on that from Possible. I know it's probably a bit of a different event from Ascendant, but were brands there? Were they out and about, or was it retailers and agencies?
No, look, I think if I think about Cannes, I think about the difference between Possible and Cannes or retail. Some of the retail shows. Possible was really tactical. It was really ad tech and vendor focused. It didn't feel like there was the big strategic blue sky thinking happening at Possible. It was about, right, what are we doing? What's coming up? What can I use? It was a really fast paced, different. They're very, very different. I would say that the Drums Summit was a kind of a highlight with regards to the awards, retail media play there. I didn't get a sense of that retail media as much in Possible. I could be wrong, but there was lots of ad tech vendors, platforms, measurement. That was what Possible was really about. It wasn't as much for me anyway.
And if I can expand on that, it felt like there was there's an American sort of operating rhythm at least for the North American guys. It's sort of their year kicks off by going to CES, and then their side gig at CES. Obviously, there's a big consumer electronics show, but media and ad tech and all the people in the ecosystem are there at CES having their kickoff meetings for the year, and then it sort of fast forwards to Possible where they all rock up again. And at Possible, they're kind of like, well, we started our conversations in January to get off to the mark. Have we got everything we need to do? Are we on track? And then a lot of them aren't going to Cannes anymore from Possible unless they have an international footprint. Because Possible's really seen as the US side of the adtech and the retail media and AI is obvious was huge ecosystem. But we did speak to a lot of people at Possible that have got the international footprint that are going to continue on to Can. And Andrea, lastly, to your point, there wasn't a lot of brands there, and it was discussed at Possible that it would be good to get a few more brands along. But the feeling was that we will see more brands at Can. So fingers crossed for that. I am aware of a few that are attending, but they did say it was harder to get across the line with their management and for perception reasons and other things. So you're right on.
Yeah. We saw that here too. I mean, even yesterday there was no one in the room that wasn't going to be at Can. So everybody, I mean, I guess European market, obviously, we were at the European Ascendant event, so much easier for them to get there. But lots of people, I think, picking and choosing where they're going, and Can is definitely still the one and the place to be at. And I think from a very broad spectrum of vendors, agencies, publishers, and brands, and the retail media network. So I think, Can still very much feels like the place to be.
Well, special shout out for ourselves. We'll be on the ground with the podcast in a full production podcast van and be interviewing a lot of people on the core set, up and down. Hot laps with air conditioning, maybe a little rosé.
I was going to say with air conditioning, that's
correct.
The crucial
bit. So from talking about Paris and talking about Miami, let's break it back down to good old Australia. Andrea, you just were at Cairns Crocodiles. What was the vibe up there? For me, from an outside that's been before but didn't make it along this year, it did seem like there was a lot of people up there. We've heard a lot of positivity from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were really excited, and we were lucky enough to host a lunch, and we hosted an event with our partners Index Exchange and Seen This. So we actually got to have a really intimate conversation with some of our customers, some vendors, clients, and other people. I think, again, a common theme was that it was smaller groups of brands, lots of ad tech vendors, less agency people this year. But I mean, again, I feel probably like to Nick's point about Possible, it was very much more tactical. Like, what are we doing? Who can we meet? What space are you in? How can we get this going? So I think it was definitely, unlike the American market, I think we didn't have that initial kickoff event in January or February in Australia. So maybe that's something the industry might need to look at. To have a gathering early in the year to kind of
kicks it off, like a February.
Yeah, set the tone, set the theme for the year, get everybody in the same space, who are we partnering with, what is it that we want to achieve this year, what are our themes. Something that we talked about a lot in Cairns was, how we can work together better as the ad tech and publisher vendors and industry to solve problems for brands and for retailers. And it's interesting because I think the retail media network space in Australia is so, it's in infancy, really, if you think, compared to Europe and America. And we just talk about things differently in Australia. It's just it was a good space, lots of people, it was buzzing.
Did that surprise you because you were there last year? Did you find that it was a different a lot more engaging, a lot more happening, a lot more conversation? Because last year felt a little bit was hard work at times. That's what I've kind of picked up.
Yeah, I think everybody was just a lot more open to conversation this year. And I think it was everybody knew that they were there to get something out of it. So it was kind of the pleasantries were put to the side, and we just got straight down to business and said, okay, well, what do you need from me? What can I give you? Who do you need me to introduce you to? And the vibe was good. But again, I think everybody was still mentioning a lot about travel restrictions, more so from a perception perspective, and just how tough the market is at the moment as well. A lot of people are
picking up on that a lot.
Really, really tough. It's like getting blood from a stone.
Andrea, if I could just double click on one of the things you said, you were talking about how the theme was about how we can work better together as an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then you sort of immediately went into retail media space. And I mean, it is in its infancy, and it is something that's talked about the Retail Media Council, the IAB Retail Media Council. And shout out to Gay. I know she attended our lunch up in Cairns with you guys. that is something to talk about. I think that's kind of, I guess, where, from a Vudoo perspective, we've been really working hard to make sure that it's really easy and seamless across the ecosystem. But are you hearing from the retailers that it is challenging in media, that it is confusing, the programmatic landscape? And is that something that we should all, the listeners, should be all thinking about? How can we make it a little bit easier to understand?
Absolutely.
How can we get those retail worlds and those ad tech worlds to sort of meet in the middle on language? There's some great resources that the Retail Media Council and the IAB are putting out. Was that the general gist?
Yeah, I think definitely we were seeing that yesterday. Not yesterday. We were seeing that last week in Cairns. There's a lot that the retail media networks need to navigate. So I think not only are they having challenges internally, they've got their own IT teams, they've got their own marketing teams, and they've got a lot to navigate internally. But then externally, they've got data vendors, and they've got ad tech vendors, and there's this vendor and that vendor. And it's just a really, I guess, it's a very fragmented and busy and cluttered space for them to actually navigate. And they don't know which part to pick out first. So a lot of them are just focusing then back internally and saying everything externally feels loud and hard. So let's just look internally and get our ducks in a row, internally first, and then start to look outward. So I think as vendors, as ad tech partners, anything we can do to, I guess, declutter the space, anything we can do to actually add value and show them how we're solving problems. And I think, Paul, that's what you and I have been working on a lot with some of our customers here in Australia, of how we can actually just solve real problems that they have. And the real problem is that it's just cluttered. They don't know where to start. So we're just going to make things easy for them.
So, Andrea and Sarah, you guys are both on the ground in Paris at a retail media, event, which has a lot of really big thinking people, a lot of decision makers. And I know that over the last year or so, there's been a theme about, how do retail media networks, how do they become more mature? What do they need to do? How do they improve things? Sarah, what were you experiencing with regards to that? Did you feel that, was it a conversation that is appearing again, or consistently at these events still?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the beginning of the day and a half that we've just had, they were explaining, the kind of history of where retail media networks started and where they are today, and just the huge proliferation that, they started off, I think, being 12, and then I think it was many hundreds anyway now across markets. So, and that was one of the themes actually, which was, what does the future look like? And the future was definitely consolidation. That was kind of clear. Yeah, but I think absolutely. What was really interesting was that they were talking about the fact that when retail media networks are kind of in their infancy, it's quite easy to work with brands and people are quite happy to test and learn. But as they get from the startup to the scale up size, that actually becomes more tricky. And to try and get it into kind of BAU of running things in the ecosystem, that was much tougher. But also I think what was quite interesting, we had some obviously Chatham House rules, so we can't sort of quote people, but there was a few kind of fairly early stage retail media networks that were saying there isn't really a great playbook to watch and see, oh, that's how to do it, that's the success story. They're all kind of testing and learning as they go.
Yeah, did you find that an interesting comment, that to be interesting commentary, given that we've been kind of in this space for a little while now, that you're still finding them we're fumbling or working our way through this on our own, which is crazy.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the RMNs, it was also the retail media generally. Is everyone was talking about, well, who does retail media sit under in the org chart? Some of it was under the CEO, some of it was under the marketing. And it's kind of all over the place depending on the industry you're in and even the market. I mean, one thing that was very apparent was the fragmentation across Europe and how they're dealing with it. And it was, I think, quite a night, particularly for Andrea with the Australian background, that just to see, we had people from Poland and people from Turkey and people from the UK, obviously, and very different angles of how they all are thinking of working. So, yeah.
And it's similar across the regions in that with regards to what you said around the playbook. And it's something I know that the IABs in all of the European IAB, US, they're all trying to work on playbooks to advise RMNs on best practice. But because every retailer is so different, it is very difficult to have the one playbook. So the other point I was going to pick up on was the fragmentation piece and therefore the consolidation. I think there's two schools of thought on this. I think, if there's standardization to a degree where you can use programmatic infrastructure to trade across many RMNs, then that is a way forward. Or there is the consolidation or grouping together of certain RMNs. And I think that's fair across all markets, even the smaller markets where there's not as many retailers like Australia are having those same problems. And certainly that was our take on it from the US market when we were in NRF earlier in the year as well. So
yeah, definitely. I think when they were talking about standardization or having like a playbook, it was more around, because 100%, the buying of it will all be much more programmatic and automated, but it was more the kind of how do you sit in an organization and how do you educate, honestly, the CFOs of all these organizations to understand what the value is, because I think that was very much a common theme and actually that was something in the kind of feedback session at the end of the event was who do we want to see more of at these events? Brands obviously came up, as Andrea mentioned earlier, but actually let's have a few CFOs. Let's talk to them and educate them in what's the industry's doing in this space, because they were the ones that will be the first, when things are tight, they want to cut these kind of things and they need to understand the value of them. So that was the theme.
That'll make the conference a bit more boring. Shout out to our CFO friends.
We did talk about having to get the right CFOs would be good.
We love you, Charlotte. We love you. What were the themes being discussed at the Retail X conference? Were they similar or?
Yeah, so very similar themes, and I'm
Yeah.
sure there'll be, and they will continue throughout the year. You don't go to a conference now without talking about measurement, standardization, data. Who owns the data was particularly something that was discussed yesterday a lot.
Well, yeah, especially with the live ramp publicists.
Yes, exactly. That came up. And then obviously AI, agentic.
Huge.
Or, those are going to be themes for the next forever.
Well, I mean, to that point, though, I think that, for the retail media networks, their heads are spinning as it is, just trying to align themselves internally and set themselves up internally, irrespective of the maturity of the retail media network. And now they're being thrown all of this information about, well, you've got to be AI ready, you've got to be agent ready, you've got to have your data, your metadata, where's that sitting? So there's so much being thrown at the retail media networks at the moment. I can understand they're juggling so many balls and there's so many spinning plates that something is going to drop. And I think that's where, we as vendors, as agencies can work better together to help smooth over some of those or take some of those spinning plates off them, so they don't all come crashing down, because they're all like, well, what do we do first? Are we fixing like our inventory that we've got on site? Are we fixing where our data's going? Are we fixing how we're going to be AI ready and agentic ready? So there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, and to that point, there was a lot of chatter about in-store, because in Europe, in-store is still massive.
But even more so here. Yeah.
Oh, huge.
As it is here in Australia, there's less chat about indoor in the US.
Yeah.
Depending on the region, they focus on different assets. Yeah.
Yeah, but they all agree that the whole kind of, to use the buzzword, omnichannel, but that came up a lot, which was, yes, in-store here is really important, but actually is how do you cross all of them and how do you connect them all up?
And what role do they play?
Exactly.
Yeah. And also what role is agentic and, the LLM's going to play in the research phase before they actually go into store as well. So that was a big theme.
Andrea, just want to go back to what you said about LiveRamp coming up. Was that an issue, was it? It was
They did a whole panel about it.
Right, okay. So, and the theme was around the fact that because it's now aligned to a different entity, some more nervousness now around using those types of solutions?
Well, I think they were using the quote from publicists about, it's not going to make any difference. And the question was, do you believe it or not? And we won't say who said what, but there was very much skepticism, obviously, as to whether it was going to make an impact. So, yeah.
But I think that skepticism is a thread they're picking up across the market, right? There's just like, well, they've gone. So there's no independent identity now. What do you do? Do you stay? Do you go? Does publicists have to play nice with Omnicom in different assets? And I thought, well, they'll kind of do a lot of that already, right?
They do.
Yeah, I think it was the kind of, I think it was the independence of things, and I think the short term view was, I think maybe other holdcos will follow the similar route, but ultimately in X period of time, years, it will have to become more independently done.
Well, they're not the first mover. Obviously, WPP with InfoSum went before Publicis with LiveRamp. So it's...
Well, you were speaking about Axiom the other day, Paul.
Yeah, well, I mean, Axiom was the old LiveRampers, sold that data company over to IPG, which is obviously now part of Omnicom. All very fast-moving and, dare I say the word, incestuous. Yeah.
So this, like our good friend Kiri Masters likes to debate the difference between retail and media and commerce media. Did that pop up at all in that? I know it's a pretty light, it's a surface level kind of conversation, but being a commerce media podcast, we could not ask the question.
It came up, I think, at the beginning when they were sort of setting the context of the sort of ecosystem, I suppose, in that they were explaining, just for those that were new to it in the room, that, you know, retail media was the beginning, and you had your standard retailers like in the UK, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, etc. And then they added different types of retail media, and now commerce media is covering, you know, you've got your financial ones in there like Revolut and telcos and people. So very much it's become commerce.
And I've been on United recently, and their connective product is sensational. We went to the launch of it, Paul and I, fortunate enough, a couple of years ago in Cannes, and it's an incredible product. Like, they've just nailed it. So yeah, commerce media is still kind of, this is now the overarching thing. We saw that a lot that came up a lot, obviously, with the commerce media, you know, awards and commerce media impossible. It was a real theme.
Yeah, the IAB council that we sit on, Paul, we're renamed to retail and commerce media. So yeah, I think it's very much
to be inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And even yesterday, you know, at Ascendant, it was, yes, it's a retail media network, but it was very much set up, as Sarah said, as a commerce media conference. So, yeah, I think we've well and truly solidified that in the space. And, you know, you two with the Commerce Media Matters podcast, early adopters into the space, revolutionary.
Oh, thanks, Andrea.
Visionaries, may I say?
Oh, that's
visionaries.
Such kind words.
Also, we did debate that with Kiri Masters when she was on our podcast, and she felt that we may have got the name right. So shout out to her.
Yeah. You call it influencers, don't you?
Yeah, your industry influencers.
Yeah, right.
But it is a nice segue to Possible and the Drum Commerce Awards at Miami, Nick. And it was good to see a publication like the Drum really getting behind commerce media, so the broader ecosystem as well as the retail media networks.
Well, they awarded some incredible companies, didn't they? Vudoo received 5 awards. Just a little pump up there.
More so that there was, 60 judges that took part in the judging criteria. The submissions were very much, rewarding those that were moving past vanity media metrics to those outcomes, those transaction, proof of transaction, closed loop attribution, these things that have been promised for a while. And sort of boiling on the surface are now starting to become the norm. And that's certainly what we saw with the nominations and the awards given, including ours, at Possible. But it was good to see how many people are in the ecosystem and are working towards that same sort of goal. I mean, you had WPP and Publicis, you had Target Rondell, you had all these big companies, MasterCard were there. There was a good cross-section of people that are filling out this ecosystem. So, Nick, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it felt like a very mature bunch of people in that room who really knew what they were doing. What kind of stands out to me is the fact that the Drum brought thought leaders and decision makers from brands, agency, ad tech vendors, and thought leaders like Kiri and others to Miami specifically to judge these awards. So it's a great industry insight, a great cross section of the industry who know what they're doing in commerce media, and they brought incredible companies and awarded them. And I think it showed me that the market is very clear that if we're going to this space is going to grow. We're aware of the some of the issues, some of the foibles, some of the things from maybe growing pains, but we want metrics to be demonstrable. We want results to be tangible, and that's what we're going to award companies for doing. And so I think with Cannes, it's going to be it's going to be around what have you delivered, what have you done, what are the metrics in this space. And I think that's born out of the fact that, retail are merchants. And now that merchant theory is going to be that desire for numbers gets pulled into their retail and commerce media.
What I really liked about the room, Nick, and you sort of touched on it then, is there was quite a few clients in the room. There was shopper agencies, media agencies, ad tech vendors. And whilst, in our case, we went on stage and picked up 5 awards, just a little quick shout out. The recognition was of everybody that it took in the ecosystem to get that happen. The client taking the brave steps to try something different, the ad tech vendors, the programmatic infrastructure, the agencies, etc. And that's what I really liked about the Drum Awards. It wasn't necessarily the agency or the client or the whatever taking home the gong. It was a recognition of these campaigns are delivering great results, and there's an ecosystem of independent people that need to interact and to get a really good result, and these guys are doing it well. Yeah, we little shout out for us, Nick. What do we get?
I think it was 2 runners-up, 2 wins, and a jury president's award. I think pat on the back, Paul. Pat on the back.
It was very nice because the jury president happened to be our own Roger Dunn, who we've had on the podcast before. So it was nice to go all that way and have a friendly face award us the President's Award on behalf of the other 60 judges. And it was nice to travel back with him after he presented the award. 30-something hours.
Yeah.
And he appeared on our presentation yesterday as well.
He's a great friend of ours, but we have to emphasize that there were 60 other judges making a decision on that, and he kind of guided it, but they made the call. So we were fortunate enough to meet a ton of interesting people there, and we actually got some really interesting people to the dinner that we hosted. We had cross-section of customers and clients. We had the great people from Nova in Moby, Epsilon, Mountain, and new players on the block throughout, our friends. There's lots of those kind of dinners happening, but I felt we had a really tight team, and it was really that dinner was all about where the industry's going and about just being demonstrable, delivering results, and then being able to demonstrate it. That was a key theme for me at our dinner.
I think something Sarah and I talked about yesterday too is just the importance of meeting in person.
Absolutely.
Especially from a vendor perspective as well. There's only so much outreach that you can do over LinkedIn or email, but until you actually get in front of somebody and talk to them about what's actually happening and build a rapport with people, what everybody's doing or what you're hearing and seeing and thinking, it just doesn't land until you've built that relationship. So, it's tricky for us, I guess, being from an Australian perspective. It's Melbourne and Sydney, and we tend to get together a little bit there. But over here as well, they're constantly in each other's faces because as we said at the top of the recording, it is definitely event season and they're seeing each other at every single event. So it's like there's the need to be there and have real conversations with people is critical.
I was just going to add to that. One of the things that I really noticed yesterday was everybody wants to know everyone wants to magic ball about what's going to happen in the future. But actually what really people cared about was what can I do now, next month, this quarter, because we need to start showing results. And so it was kind of like, what are the key things that I can literally put my arms around right now that's going to make a difference to my business? So that was quite interesting because normally events are quite future gazing. It was much more about what's happening tomorrow.
It's an interesting one to pick up on, Sarah, because I would say that of Cannes over the last few years that Nick and I have been attending, from the first couple of times we went to the end, it was maybe a junket, maybe an education, maybe a let's see, 12, what's coming down the pipeline, to very much people wanting to get deals done and seeing ROI from the trip.
It's always, I think people have the perception like it's a bit of a, marketing nirvana, or it's I've earned this and I can go to this junket. And I think they get slapped about when they realize, geez, this is a massive, just one big piece of business happening, and everybody is hungry to talk about strategy, dealing. It's flat out at Cannes.
And I think also, but the future is so movable, right? I think, back, 10, 15 years ago, the future, everything was probably just a little bit slower. Everything is moving at such a fast pace that you can't start thinking, okay, well, what's coming up in a year's time? Because we don't even know what's coming up in 3 months' time. Things can change so quickly and so rapidly that I think everybody is holding on to, and as Sarah said, wrapping their arms around, well, what can we do in the next quarter? Everybody's obviously got, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-year strategies and whatever it is. But, to actually go back to your business once you've been to a conference or once you've been to a gathering to say, well, what's the ROI on you being there? So you have to have something tangible to bring back.
I guess what we're saying as well with this the ecosystem that it takes to win these awards and the face-to-face element, where else can you go to other than an event where you can have several members of the ecosystem and meet them all one after the other on the same day? And I think that's the value, is that, no one's an island. It's moving so fast. You need great partners, and it's multiple partners. It's not one or two. And so the CAN and Possible and the Ascendant Council, those sorts of events allow you to have, multiple conversations over a couple of days and start to join up those dots.
I was going to say exactly to that point. It's connecting the dots, especially for the retail media networks and for the brands. It's actually saying, oh, that's where you all sit in the ecosystem. I've connected all those dots, and you actually have a round table conversation and actually kind of reduce the noise and the clutter in that space.
Well, Andrea and I were actually laughing because we would say, we talk a lot about engagement and attention and the fact that, a customer needs to see an ad X number of times before they engage. It's exactly the same as networking and understanding things. So you have to meet someone 4 or 5 times before you really understand what they're looking
So
for,
true.
what they need, how you can help them.
Yep.
And it's exactly the same.
And they need to buy into you.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? It's not just the product. It's not just the brand. They're actually buying into you. Can you solution something for me? And I need to be familiar with you and be sure that you can do it. And it's going to take a little while for that to happen.
Particularly when you're a category defining product,
Yes.
or you're in retail media, which is, as we were saying, it's only just sort of getting off to the races and starting to mature. You need to actually meet more and more and more because it's out of your comfort zone. It's out of your norm. So not only the face-to-face meetings are important in my experience, but actually physically showing and walking through the product with the visual is something that I think it's not just the meetings.
Agree. Yeah. Yesterday I had my phone with me showing people real life examples of what the product does, because then they get it. I mean, as you said, because we're a category defining technology in business, it's not, there was a company there yesterday that I said, oh, what do you do? And there's like, oh, we do this. We're kind of like Criteo, or we're kind of like Zitcher, or like we don't have that in our space. Like we can't say, oh, we're kind of like this or that, because what we're doing is so unique and powerful that you really just have to show people and build that trust, as Sarah said.
But I also think you've got a lot of people, particularly with the emergence of AI, where you get we can build that in AI. Not we have built it, we have made it work, and it's a tangible product. And so I think there's a level of healthy skepticism out there around, can you as a software company or a technology layer build it, or have you got it built and have you made it work? And that's what's so important about showing them the tangible asset or visual. Some of the big SaaS companies that are valued at very expensive times multiples, although they've not had a great run. You buy these off-the-shelf products and it's never built quite the way you need it to. And there's all that experience in the minds of these retailers as well, isn't there? Like, I bought in a CRM and then it cost me a fortune to maintain, and it was a lot of work and a lot of integration. So for providers like ourselves in the adtech, where we actually are a light touch, it's really important to be able to show them the physical product and how light touch it can be.
And obviously that's I would say, dare say, a conversation that would happen, is going to happen over and over again, especially when we're at CAN. If I come back to the difference between CAN and Possible, CAN feels like it is designed, and it now probably happens a lot organically. It's been running for so long, but there's super engagement, lots of thought leadership, lots of opportunity to pitch and sell, but then there's so many activations that happen in and around the CAN lines, obviously the awards, but then all the activations, everything, and all these little conversations and stuff that happen at nighttime, and all these different that are designed to get conversations happening and to get opportunities. I felt that was maybe lacking a bit at Possible, like it was very controlled. Whereas CAN, it happens so well that it can, right? I've been talking to Colin Lewis about what's an activation next year. There could be something different to get different people talking about things in a different experience.
Yeah, Nick, I would echo that for Cairns in Australia.
Right.
It felt very controlled as well. There wasn't the opportunity of like a thoroughfare of spaces you could kind of go. It was all like at the conference centre, and it was very kind of closed. Like the lanyards, you could only get into certain like public bars and places that were sponsored, instead of encouraging, lots of industry to, come in and have conversations. It was very, you don't have the right pass, you can get here, there and there. So being in Cannes last year in France, comparing that to Cairns, Australia, very different.
They almost create opportunity for serendipity, right?
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, hey, I saw that thing, and actually, I'm glad that we bumped into you. I saw that last week. Couldn't you? Yeah.
And what's very different then if you take Ascendant in the mix, because it's a completely different, it's a Chatham House rules, so much smaller group of people, but therefore much more outspoken. And you're together for a day and a half, and you have dinner and things, and so the conversation is much more authentic. So you did hear conversations where people are saying, "This isn't working for me. How do you make it work for your company?" And they're competitive, and they're having those conversations. They're not having to read off scripts. They haven't had the marketing guys kind of giving them the talking points. They're being very, there was one panel where they had 4 agency people talking about, what's the role of the agency and that sort of thing. And they were competitive, but they were all talking about exactly the same things. And then they were kind of laughing, saying, "I'd love to know how you've solved that. And let's chat about it afterwards." So it was much more kind of that kind of vibe.
But also like a lot of admission about like, well, we haven't solved it. And like, we don't know what we're doing, and we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So that kind of thing was a lot more open. Yeah, yesterday, a lot less, I guess, polished and a lot more authentic. But it's good to be able to attend events where you know that you can relax and like the Ascendant, and you can kind of, take off the filter. It feels like a very different vibe. You're learning different things, you're hearing different things from different people. Whereas some of those other events that you're going there to kind of do the sell, kind of then start to feel a little bit the same and similar, and you're having similar conversations, comes a bit of an echo chamber. Whereas I thought from an Ascendant perspective, it was really good just to have the mix of people, with no filter. It was great.
Okay, well, this has been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah, great guess. Who knew we had such a talented team, and when we didn't have to look so far to find great guests?
Oh, who would have thunk it, hey? Who would have thunk it? Appreciate you being on board. We can't talk about it too much. Can we kind of teaser, but we've got an incredible activation happening for the Commerce Media Matters podcast. And we can't wait to show you. And we've got a ton of guests coming. We've got a lot of really interesting insights coming out of that. It's going to be a big week.
Little birdie told me 30 plus guests or so.
Big week. How are we going to do that?
Yeah.
Keeping us busy. Thanks again. Lovely to have you guys on board. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us, girls.
Thanks, guys.
See you in Cannes.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.